All right, today we're going to be talking about domestic violence and abuse. We're calling it part two. The first part is Carol's presentation on interpersonal conflict. I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful presentation about how to deal with interpersonal conflict, particularly between partners. But this is getting more to that next level when it turns into domestic violence and abuse, when it's to that point. Originally, I was going to do a lot of stuff with Carol's presentation. There was just too much to cover. So do understand some of this might feel like an overview, but I'm going to try to cover a lot in a short time. If someone has questions or needs more information, you can certainly ask here today. You can also email me. My email is super easy. It's just elizabeth@blomquisthale.com. Likewise, if you need more resources, just ask. I'm happy to get them to you. It's a little bit of where I'm coming from, where my background is. So I worked for a company called Sister Care, and their domestic violence agency in South Carolina. And part of my job for Sister Care was actually running a support group for domestic violence victims who were currently in prison at Catherine Graham Correctional Facility. But I completed my training at Sister Care. I enjoyed working with them. I was also part of the Green Dot Initiative in Wrangell and Petersburg, Alaska. If you guys don't know where that is, that's just fine. They're itsy bitsy little places. But it was a grant program in Alaska for responding to community concerns. And for these two cities, it was domestic violence and alcohol abuse. So it was a huge project for a very rural area. Wrangell has about 2,000 people, Petersburg, maybe 3,000. I was also on the Domestic Violence Coalition for that area. I've had contracts with Child Protective Services, and I've been a mental health therapist for about 13 years. So to start off, let's talk with a little bit of terminology. Domestic violence abuse. Violence or abuse that occurs between parent-child, roommates, basically someone in a common dwelling. Now, we sometimes hear these terms used interchangeably. Understand they're all relevant per se, just some are better terms than others. If you're looking for support services, if you're looking for, say, a shelter, odds are it's going to be under domestic violence, not intimate partner violence. But if you hear these terms, very similar. So intimate partner violence abuse is violence or abuse that occurs between intimate partners, regardless if they're living together or married. So this could be boyfriend, girlfriend. This could be someone that does not live with me, but I am married. Interpersonal violence abuse is violence or abuse that occurs between two people, regardless of relationship. So for example, a stalker, that would be interpersonal violence. Stalking someone is abuse, it is violence. But you don't necessarily have a romantic relationship with them. Might be the reason they're a stalker. So you might hear these terms. I try to use one or the other in a presentation, but if you hear me slip between one, understand I'm usually referring to the entire umbrella. Some more terminology, and I'm not gonna get super in depth in this, but what is physical abuse, sexual abuse? I honestly debate on even putting this in here, but I think it's worth reminding people it doesn't have to be a certain level of severity. Pinching can be physical abuse. So can hitting. So can a threat. Sexual abuse, it does not have to be rape. It could absolutely be recording a picture and posting on social media against my partner's will. It could be unwanted touch. All these things qualify. And honestly, this list doesn't even cover all of it sometimes. Emotional abuse, it's one I get asked about a lot. What qualifies? All these things qualify. Now, do they always? Depends. I'll honestly tell you, it does depend. But these things can be considered abuse. Destruction of property, pets. It's not one we always talk about. We don't always talk about the controlling of money, irrational jealousy, destruction of our possessions. These are all forms of abuse as well. Victim versus survivor. These are other terms that we use. We use the term victim because legally in court, when we're talking to somebody, we say victim because they're not responsible for the assault and abuse they suffered. They were not an active participant in their abuse. They were a victim. This happened to them. But we also use the term survivor because we want to recognize the strength of a person who has been abused, assaulted, and avoid that stigma that comes with the term victim. There is a lot of stigma in saying, I'm a victim of something. So again, you might hear these interchangeably. I personally prefer the term survivor, but victim's an important term too, especially in the legal sense. So here's some Utah stats. Not very pretty. Some of these are a little dated. I'm really hoping to get some new data soon, but this is kind of what we have. 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence. We know 33 women and 21 of Utah men will experience some form of inter-partner violence. In 2020, there was a day where there were that many calls to domestic violence programs. And the latest stats that we really have in depth are from 2009, 2016. Again, I really look forward to when we have more up-to-date stats. These are all provided by the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, Commission on Criminal Justice, Utah Department of Health. I do have some links at the back for anyone that wants to look into these. So how can I help someone who I know is being abused? And this is a question I get a lot, and it's really one I wanted to kind of help people with today. Big one is to be willing to genuinely listen without judgment. When someone tells you they're being abused, it's instinctual. As human beings, we want to fix, we want to help. We want to understand, we want to ask questions like, are you sure? They've never been that way to me. When did this start? What did you do first? We mean well. These are horrible things to say to someone who's dealing with abuse. Having to tell somebody that you are being victimized in that way is extremely vulnerable and frightening. And so we have to really be willing to listen. It's not about trying to fix, it's about being willing to hear and not throwing judgment. Because when we do, they're not likely to feel like they can talk to you, to feel like they can report. Do not force or bully them to make a decision on what you think is best. Again, we want to help. We want to fix it. We don't want this person who we care about to be hurt. But when you bully or force them, you're taking away the ability for them to make a decision. And if they're being abused, that's already happening. When you bully them, force them to leave. When you force them to acknowledge something is abuse when they're not ready to, what's happening is you're making it really hard for them to feel like they can talk to you. It can be super humiliating for someone to tell you it's abuse when you don't feel like it is. It can also make you more likely to feel like you have to defend your abuser. And we all do that to some degree. You know, I'm allowed to say bad things about my partner, but you're not. I can complain about my sister, you're not. Abuse cycles are really hard. And so even though we really want to just pick them up and take them out of the bad situation, it's really important that we don't. It doesn't help to shame them for not being ready or for going back to that relationship. One of the big things that's happening with people that are abused is they're isolated. An abuser can keep them isolated, keep them from having people they can talk to who can help them. And so we just go, you know, I tried to help you. You didn't leave. If you're going to stay with them, I'm done. When we do that, you're just making them more isolated. It's hard. It's really hard to know someone, to care for somebody and know they're being hurt. But it's so very important that you don't make them feel ashamed that they came to you. Do not put yourself in a dangerous situation. I have a lot of very well-meaning people that tell me, I want to go in and tell this abuser exactly where they can stick it. They can't hurt this person this way. That's not helpful. That can be used not only to hurt you, but it can also be used to hurt this person that they're already abusing. The best thing to do is offer support, not take it upon yourself. Offer resources. Oh, and also don't put yourself in a dangerous situation. Don't beat up an abuser. It can make them look like a victim. Offer resources. I'm going to have pages and pages of resources at our end. And again, if anyone needs a resource that's not on there, I have pages and pages at my desk that I'm happy to share with anyone who needs them. If it is a child or vulnerable adult, you can reach out to DCFS or APS, Adult Protective Services, or Division of Child and Family Services. I have the hotline numbers right here for DCFS and APS. If you're not sure whether to report or not, there is no harm in calling. and saying, here's what I think is happening. Give them the information you have. Now, of course, if you're a mandated reporter like me, you might be used to making these calls. That's a little different for us. But if you have a concern, it's okay to call. If you genuinely think someone's in danger, you're not breaking any laws by saying, hey, here's what I think is happening. And these calls are anonymous. So the abuser is not going to know that you called. Why don't they just leave? I get asked this a lot. There's a lot of barriers to leaving an abusive relationship or a domestic violence situation. Finances. They might not have money. They might not have a car. They might not have their own cell phone. They might not have any way to support themselves. There may be fear of losing custody of their children. There may be a beloved pet or valuable property in the home that they don't have a place to keep or take safe. They might be isolated. They might not have people they can talk to, people who can help them. This is one of the things that really works well for abusers. If I can get you to avoid all your friends, not connect with your family, convinced that they're against us, you might not go to them for help. And when you don't go to them for help, you're dependent on me, the abuser. It's really dangerous. I've had a lot of women and men that I've worked with that when they finally get out of the situation, they're struggling with reconnecting those friendships. People that were like, she just stopped taking my calls. I don't know what happened to her, so we just lost touch. Others, they'll say, well, I didn't like their partner, and so I stopped coming over. I stopped visiting. I stopped inviting them out. And so they just become alone. They don't have help. Rural environments or lack of resources. Rural environments are hard. We have some in Utah, despite how many people we have in this lovely state. A rural environment makes it super hard. Maybe I live in a place that doesn't have a domestic violence shelter. Or in a really rural environment, sometimes the shelter is easy to find. When I was working in Alaska, as I said earlier, there was 2,000 people on the island. You can go to a friend's house and not be found. It was too small. Most people, when it was that bad, had to leave the island to get to safety. There wasn't really a safe place to go. If they don't have a car, if you don't have a walkable street in your area, if you don't have bus services, you might not be able to get to safety. Fear of reprisal or further harm. A lot of them have been hurt badly, not always physically, but there could be consequences for them trying to leave. And they're real, and they're scary. Fear of not being believed or threats from their abuser about what will happen, or feelings there's not enough evidence. I hear it all the time. They didn't leave any marks. They told me that because I have this mental health condition, I have bipolar, I have schizophrenia, I have PTSD, that no one's going to believe me. I hit him back once, no one's going to believe me. I hear it all the time. Vulnerability due to mental health, citizenship status, I've seen that a lot, where someone's really afraid they could lose their ability to stay in this country because if they leave their abuser, that could be pulled away. Some don't even know what their rights are or what the laws are. I've had mothers, fathers too, tell me, well, if I get reported for abuse by this partner that abused me, or if they take my kids, it could happen. It's pretty scary stuff. Some people have physical health issues that make it hard to leave. They're dependent on their partner for support. They might be part of a vulnerable minority that's going to have trouble finding support. Some people doubt what happened is abuse. I didn't have a mark. They let me have money. I just have to ask permission, and he makes the money, she makes the money, or she says that I have to give her the money because I'm no good with money. It's not abuse. There's stigma with being abused or considered a victim, like we talked about earlier. And a lot of people really love that abuser despite the harm. They wouldn't be in that if they didn't. That's hard. You can't just turn it off like a switch. There's an impact on the body and the mind when you're abused. And there could be a whole presentation on that. I think we've even done some on just that. I highly recommend the body keeps a score if you're really interested in that topic. But when you're in an abusive relationship, your brain chemistry literally changes to try to survive. And it makes it really hard to walk away because you're trying to avoid that abuse, that harm. And so better to stay. Some people have tried to leave before, it didn't work out. I tried to verify the statistic I was taught in school. I wasn't able to verify it, but when I was in school, I was told that you're likely to leave 7 times before you leave for good. Some are kept forcibly via threats or physical means. They can't leave their home. There's a consequence if they try. What is gaslighting? I get asked this, I swear, at least once a week. It's the use of psychological manipulation to convince a person to question their sanity or abilities. And basically what it is I'm trying to convince you that you're in the wrong, what you saw or think happened did not happen. And so an example might be, I didn't hit you. I did not hit you. You came over and you ran to my hand. That's how you got that bruise. That's gaslighting. It could be saying something like, well, come on, mother-in-law, partner, if I was maybe in a poly relationship, you saw what happened. If I can convince you that this didn't happen, that you're the one in the wrong, that your perception is wrong, it's gaslighting. And it's a really horrible tactic that's used to manipulate people that are being abused. And it works. The term is actually decently old. It comes from an older movie called Gaslight. If you ever get the chance to see it, I recommend the Ingrid Bergman version. She's particularly amazing in that. Just to give you a little idea of where gaslighting comes from in that, it's a story about a woman who marries an abusive man who convinces her that she's going crazy. Absolutely convinces her, gets the whole staff in the house convinced as well, that she is crazy, losing her mind. Also, he can get away with abusing her and taking complete advantage of her. That's what gaslighting is. Why do abusers abuse? There are a lot of different reasons. Again, that's one that could do a whole presentation on. Some have mental health concerns of their own. Some have experienced abuse themselves. Some have very poor self-esteem. At the end of the day, though, it usually comes down to control. And even if that control, it might be motivated by fear, trauma, past hurt, it's still usually about control. I need control over you in the situation so that I feel safe. But regardless of why, it is never a victim or survivor's fault. It is not possible to force somebody to abuse you. But that is one of the things an abuser might gaslight you into thinking. I wouldn't get so angry if you just listened to me. I wouldn't have to do this if you would just know your place, if you would just do this. It's one of the things we do is convince that person that's being abused is their fault. I'm not abusive. I'm not horrible. I'm not doing anything wrong. I wouldn't do it if you didn't. And that helps keep that abuser able to abuse. And I've heard it so many times. But they're such a nice person. They're so nice to me. I've had cases, so many cases, where someone says, well, they're a great father. They're a great brother. They're a great worker. They're a wonderful friend, a wonderful girlfriend. How could they be abusive? It's very possible to be kind and considerate to other people while abusive to one or more other people. That's very possible to do. Both things can be true. Can an abuser change? I put this slide in and took it out like 3 times. I get asked this by every person I have come through that's been abused. They can change. I'm not going to tell you they can't. It's absolutely possible. But I can tell you that it's never going to be a victim or survivor that will force them to change. You cannot be so sweet, so kind, that they will change. You cannot anticipate their every move, their every need, and get them to change. And that's part of what psychologically happens to someone that's being abused. They're very reasonable people. Victims are. They're not weak or dumb. They're not full of bad judgment. They are very reasonable people dealing with an unreasonable situation. And so one of the things they try to do is, if I just do it right, there won't be this abuse. It will go okay this time. If I just remember to always move this thing, if I just am kind and patient with them, if I get us into counseling, if I do this, it will be okay. It won't be like this. And it can happen again and again and again. It's never a victim's fault. They do not have that kind of control. And when you stay, not only is there a risk of harm, but you're likely to continue the abuse cycle. So here's the abuse cycle. If you look at almost any manual or book about domestic violence or abuse, you will see something very similar to this. There's some slight variance here and there, but most of them look exactly like this. And it's got 3 phases: the honeymoon phase, the tension phase, and acute explosion. There's a slight variance in how it looks in each abusive relationship. Usually starts with tension building. They start to get moody, they start to nitpick, they start to not be affectionate, starts to be not nice comments, yelling, maybe drinking, drugs, threats, destruction of property, sullen, critical. Now, sometimes those things happen when we have the explosion, that next stage. It varies. The acute explosion is when the abuse comes out, and it might be really severe. It might not feel as severe. It might feel like, well, it was just verbal abuse. All abuse is abuse. It might be destruction of property. It might be physical harm. It might be sexual harm. But when that explosion's over, there'll be that honeymoon phase, the apologies, the swearing, it'll never happen again. Some of that manipulation and gaslighting. It wouldn't have happened if you would just learn to never talk to me that way. Then this will not happen again. Sometimes they'll promise to go to counseling or AA. They start going to church, whatever it is that will get you as an abuse victim to give in, to tell me it's okay, to tell me you're going to stay. Some of the really nasty ones I see are crying, trying to elicit sympathy. I'm just under so much stress. I'm so sorry I did this. It will never happen again. It's just too much pressure. My mental health is not so good. All these things that will try to get the victim to feel bad. It might even involve other family members, kids, in-laws, to try to say, just forgive them. It was a one-time thing. It wasn't abuse. But eventually it'll start getting tense again. I've seen cases where a victim, survivor, will even just push the abuser a little bit just so they can get that tension phase over, get through the explosion and get to the honeymoon phase. I know that might sound really silly, insane even, but when you're stuck in the cycle, it's so hard to get out because at that center is the denial. This can't be abuse. And both parties are that way. The abuser's trying to decide it's not abuse. I can't be an abuser. I can't be a bad person. And the person that's being victimized, I'm not a victim. I'm not being abused. It's not that bad. If we just figure this out, it won't happen anymore. There was an internet story going around. Some of you might have seen it over Super Bowl Sunday. Some of you guys might have seen a commercial where they were kind of teasing that they were changing the channel. I think it was for Tubi, which is a streaming service. And there was this man and woman. They worked together. I think they've been married about 3 or 4 months. And the spouse, the male spouse, became enraged, insisting that his female partner was changing the channel. She was trying to explain it was a joke. Can't you see that it's the commercial? It's just a joke. He started threatening her, getting angry, and busted a hole in the wall. Terrified her badly. She left. She, last I checked, is staying with family and friends. I could easily see how that situation could have gone back into the cycle of, I'm sorry, I overreacted. It shouldn't have happened. I was just frustrated. It was just a football game and I was, excited. I was aggressive. And maybe it was, but that's a lot to ask somebody to stay for, because it might be that they just go into the cycle and it happens again and again. It might get worse. That's hard to predict. Every situation's unique. This is another one that I get asked a lot. Do victim survivors have poor judgment? A lot of them, when they get out, they have a lot of doubt. They wonder, what if I date someone that's exactly like who I was with before? I clearly have bad judgment. No, they don't. A lot of people will think, well, they have poor self-esteem. If you raise their self-esteem up, they'll leave that abusive situation. No, there's plenty of victims that have very good self-esteem. They're responding to an unreasonable situation. To make clear for everybody, let's talk about a situation that's not necessarily in this vein, maybe a different abusive situation. Let's say you got an abusive boss. Not the same thing I know as domestic violence, but you got a boss that treats you really badly. Now, a reasonable person decides, well, but I need the job. I don't want a bad reference. Well, I'm going to go through all these routes and try to fix it. I'm going to try to talk to HR. I'm going to try to talk to my supervisor about my concerns. I'm going to try just to not make that mistake again that caused them to explode. These are all very reasonable. That's a reasonably thought out response. But if you have someone that's abusive, they're going to make it an unreasonable situation. So back into domestic violence. I should be able to assume that my romantic partner, my parent, my roommate, I should be able to assume my girlfriend, boyfriend cares about me and would not abuse or hurt me. And it usually doesn't start super ugly. It becomes, well, it takes two to fight. I must have had some part in that. I just need to know not to bring that thing up again. It's clearly a topic we can't discuss. I should just never bring up politics again. I should just work on better communication. If I communicated clearly, nothing would have happened. We wouldn't have had to get that far. A lot of us say things like we should have responsibility, as we should in most reasonable partnerships. They try to figure out how to fix it. They're usually very kind people who take personal responsibility. They're usually people that will constantly say, I want to make this work. Let's make this work. And if you got someone that's abusive, they'll go, sure, you change. Or I'll change for now. I'll be in that honeymoon phase. We're going to try counseling. It's not going to work, but I'll try. I'll do this thing. I'll promise to do this thing. It will never happen again. Again, we're responding in a reasonable manner. I'm trying to fix this. But abuse is an unreasonable situation. You can't be reasonable and expect it to work. Safety planning. It's another one I could do a whole presentation on. So a safety plan is a personalized plan for keeping you and your loved ones safe. They vary a little bit. Most of them will feature a checklist of something that you need, some things you need if there's an emergency. It might be just in a situation where you're leaving the situation temporarily for good. It might be just there's a violent situation, I'm getting away. These are just some of the things listed that one should probably have access to in a situation. Things like IDs, money bank information, medication, keys, current photos, phones, and you want locations off. That is something I have to remind people a lot. That didn't used to be a problem, but now it's really easy to get on an app. If, say, we shared a Vivint Home system and I want to see where you are, I could look and try to figure out, oh, you're away from home. Why are you away from home? Your phone says you are. You really want to be careful if you're leaving a situation to have the locations turned off on your phone so that no one can find you via an app. Vaccine, immunization records, evidence of abuse, insurance information, important numbers. These are all very important things. It's very smart to have copies of these things put somewhere safe. I know people that keep them in a safe deposit box with a family member or friend, but having them somewhere where you can get to them. They're hard to get later. Some people have safety plans that have code words with family or friends, neighbors, or a signal to say, I need help. Having access to the help and numbers for help. Most of us can't rattle off the number for a domestic violence shelter locally. There's probably a few of us that could. Most of us can't. Knowing where those numbers are. And for the record, almost all those websites have a way for you to quickly click and leave that website, but also make sure you clear your search history. That goes for phones, that goes for computers. Otherwise, an abuser might find out that that's what you were looking at. Creating a plan with children and for pets. Where's my pet going to go? What's going to be safe? There's a website I have at the end of the resources that actually talks just about that. Creating a plan with children. I've done this for families where I've sat down with children and talked about, okay, if this happens, where could you go? What would be the safe place to go if mom and dad are getting violent and you need to leave? We've talked about safe neighbors, safe businesses they could get to, numbers they could call. One of the things I remember going over when I was learning this stuff is telling a parent, don't run to your children when you're being abused. They might now become a target. I have children all the time that say, I don't want to leave. My mom, my dad, they might get hurt. If I leave, that could happen. One of the things I tell them is if you stay, they're more likely to get hurt because they got to protect you. So these are talks we should have with our children. Having a plan for leaving, as well as a plan for if violence has occurred. Maybe you're not ready to leave yet. What's the plan if you need to get away to safety, even if it's just temporarily? Protective orders. Do I need one? Do I want one? Not everyone does, and that's okay, but it's an option. You can even have the police come over to the home to be there while you take your things and back up the car. Special considerations. I already brought up rural environments. Again, it's one of the things you got to think about. What are my resources? How can I get to safety? All those things, they're different in a rural environment. High medical need. If it's someone with high medical needs, it's a lot harder to get out of the situation. So I can think of cases like where someone's bedbound, has oxygen. Those are really important things to consider. COVID or other disasters. One of the things we saw in COVID was a lot of domestic violence situations where people couldn't leave. It was a high stress time, a lot of financial stress for people, a lot of stress in the media. Quite a few people were afraid of all kinds of things happening. We had people who were believing some conspiracy theories. Those can be a form of psychological manipulation to get a partner or children or someone in my household to stay, is convince them it's dangerous out there. But other disasters too. When there's a natural disaster, that can be really dangerous for someone in a domestic violence situation or abuse situation. It's hard for them to leave if the resources locally are strained. It's hard to leave if I can't safely drive away. Vulnerable populations, and there are so many here. People of color, there is still some racism in that world. There is still trouble with people that are LGBTQ+, trying to find the right resources that meet their needs. It's really hard if you're an older adult to get out of these situations. They're particularly vulnerable. Again, health needs. If I have a huge health issue, it's hard. People with mental health issues. There's a higher rate of people with severe mental health issues being abused or sexually assaulted. One of the things I've seen at least twice in my career is someone with schizophrenia, which schizophrenia, you are prone to delusions, hallucinations. And there was a couple really horrible cases I had where they were being abused, but their family was convincing them, nope, that was an hallucination. That did not happen that way, which is a horrible form of manipulation and gaslighting. Males in need of shelter. Some domestic violence shelters won't house males over a certain age, partially because quite a few victims that come in are women. Men can be victims too, but in certain areas, there might have to be other options for where they can stay to stay safe. I know in Utah, there's some good support for that. I can't speak for every area, but I know in Salt Lake and Ogden, we have some really good support services just for males. So 4 pages of resources, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. Sorry, I'm not going to go over each and every one of these. I've included a website if there was one available and the hotline number. If you want just the regular number, check the website. The National Domestic Violence Line, wonderful organization, so many resources. Our Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, that's also where that safety planning is, if you want to look at that. YCC Crisis Center in Ogden, CAPS Cache Valley, Safe Harbor. I'm an Ogden girl. As Heather was saying, I work up in our northern region, so I love our local resources particularly. YWCA, Women in Jeopardy Salt Lake, wonderful organization. And there's also information on the confidential walk-in services for survivors of domestic violence. Rough Haven, that's a wonderful organization that opened in Salt Lake a few years ago. And what they do is they provide shelter support for animals while someone's in a domestic violence shelter, a homeless shelter, or getting substance treatment. They're a wonderful organization. I really hope to see them expand further in our state. Weber State, U of U, BYU, they all have resources on campus, including the U of U sexual assault line. DCFS, now that is the main number that will get you your local DCFS. So DCFS is organized by county. So you want to talk to your local DCFS if possible. That number will help you figure out which one is your local number. The Siegel Lilly Center for the Abused Deaf. This is, again, one of those vulnerable populations. It's a little harder to report abuse if you are deaf. And so they have a video crisis line, a text crisis line. They're a wonderful organization. The Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Utah Legal Services, Crime Victims Legal Clinic, 211 United Way, they're amazing. They have lists and lists and lists of resources. I keep a list at my desk of every local county resource for domestic violence from them. They are fabulous. Rape Recovery Center, again, wonderful organization. These are just some books and reading resources. This is the latest statewide needs assessment that was done on domestic violence. I have included it. I'm looking forward to when we see more with it, but if anyone wants to read it. And these are all books that I just recommend. Some of them are a little older, most are pretty current, but all really good books on these topics. These are resources for kids. So for teens, In Love and Danger is a great one for talking to teens about abusive relationships. And yes, teens do get in abusive relationships. Scarlet Teen is a website I use. It's a sex education website. But they also have some really good articles on what is a healthy relationship. And they have a specifically for teen safety plan. Sometimes teens do not want to open up to their parents, their teachers, their adults about, I'm struggling with a safe relationship. Because then you might say, well, you just can't date them anymore. Remember all those barriers we talked about? Those can be true of teens too. They might really, really feel like they love them. They might really love them. They might feel like they can't leave for whatever reason. So sometimes we need a source that's not us, the parent or caregiver. Sometimes we need them to hear it from someone else. And Scarlet Teen has a lot of other amazing articles on all kinds of topics. But I've included their little quiz on is it a healthy relationship and their safety plan for teens. Now, young children, there's a couple workbooks I use with children because for them, reading doesn't always go. So these are workbooks that they can color in and learn about, including coping with bad events, something terrible happens, and the Sesame Street Communities website. If you haven't been there, they're wonderful. They have so many great videos on really hard to talk to topics for preschoolers and that crowd. Having that really great language to be able to talk to a kid about something horrible happening in our community and having it be from someone familiar like Elmo really does help. So that is my presentation. Oh, good, I did leave time for questions. Yay! If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute. You're welcome to message me. I've stopped sharing my screen so no one else will see your question if you want to send it directly to me. Any questions at all? Could be about resources or something specific. Question was, am I in Ogden? I work in Ogden. Today I'm in Logan. So I work and manage our Logan, Ogden, and Farmington locations. My main office is in Ogden. Anyone else? Questions about resources? Questions about what Blomka's tail? How do you support someone in an abusive relationship that doesn't want to leave? It's, again, a really good question. And like I talked about on our slide, be genuinely willing to listen and support them. If they're not ready to leave, if you push them, they're just going to stop talking to you. They're going to leave and then go back. As hard as it is, it's about genuinely being supportive of where they're at. So if they're not ready to leave, I've got a few more questions, great. If they're not ready to leave, really, again, be genuinely supportive, offer the resources, and keep the door open for them if they come back. If they come back and say, hey, I'm ready to go, help them. It's hard, it's emotionally draining and heartbreaking. But if you force them to leave, odds are they won't leave for good. They'll just end up going back, or they'll just cut off contact. I see it all the time. They tell the spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend, hey, that's just a mean friend that doesn't like me. Why are you hanging out with them? And they start to cut off ties. All right, let's see some of these other questions. How do you get over a domestic violence situation? It's not something you ever get over. I'm not saying that to discourage. When you've been through something awful, you evolve from it, you don't get over it. You're never going to reach the point where you look back and go, that was fun. We can do that every time. But you're going to reach a point where it doesn't dodge your every step, where it doesn't feel like it's part of your entire story. It's just one part of it. Counseling helps with that. One of the books that I recommended on my reading list is a book just about that aftermath. It's also about building back your trust in yourself. It tends to make us doubt our judgment. It tends to make us doubt how we feel about other people. It takes time to heal. It takes time to trust again. And part of that is living a life and getting support, not isolating, building new friendships, building up those friendships you lost. Helps remember that I am a good person. I am worthwhile. This is not going to define all my relationships just from this one. After leaving, again, you got to build that support. It is really scary to leave. And if you feel alone, you feel like you can't do it. Sometimes having a good counselor, sometimes using a place like CAPSA or YCC, sometimes building a network of friends, family, other survivors. One of the great things we have in this day and age is support online. So you can find support groups even on Facebook if that's your preference, but not trying to do it alone. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. And being alone is one of the things that makes it easier to isolate you, make you feel like you can't do it without your abuser. And I promise you, you can. I don't have to know any of you to know you can do this on your own. So there's a question about, I've reported some abuse and it's not getting anywhere. One of the things to do when you've reported abuse, especially of a child, and it's not getting anywhere, is to keep documenting, keep reporting. I especially recommend with children, getting them in with a really good counselor that you trust, who can speak for you in court if needed, who can speak for your child. Someone that can document, I've heard this. Therapists are mandated reporters. That means by law, if I'm aware of abuse happening with one of my clients, I have to report. It is not if and or but. I am legally obligated. It also gives them a sense of support. I also really work with children in those situations, especially when we've already reported and it's gone nowhere. How can you stay safe? If you're at the other parent's home, if you're at grandma's home and you don't feel safe, how can we help you feel safe? Having ways to reach the other parent or family member, knowing where to go that's safe in their neighborhood. That's not always easy. I've literally sat there with Google Maps before with a kid and gone, okay, there's a 7-Eleven like 2 houses down. If you went there, here's what you could do. Is it ideal? Not at all. This was a pretty rural environment at the time. But trying to find, how can I help this child stay as safe as possible? It sucks when we've done everything we can to protect somebody and the system just doesn't have enough. I would just encourage you to always keep trying, keep documenting, keep building the support until the system works for you. It's a tricky system. That's definitely one I'd love to fix. Will there be another workshop? There will be lots of other workshops. We do these monthly. This one will be recorded and posted on YouTube. So you guys will be able to watch anything you missed. Do survivors, victims ever show signs they may be in an abusive situation? Yes. So isolation is a really big one, kind of avoiding people, all of a sudden cutting off contact, sometimes injuries, sometimes low self-esteem, negative self-talk, but not always. That's a tricky thing, is everyone's different. I've met really powerful, confident people that you'd never think are being abused that are. They put on a really good mask. Sometimes there's situations like they start saying there's trouble at home, but they don't give you a lot of details. Sometimes missing work a lot, or saying, well, I have to ask my partner. I have to really ask my parent to do that for something that wouldn't seem normal. I remember there was a really good friend of mine years ago, therapist, brilliant therapist at that. And she was in a pretty bad abusive relationship where she constantly had to consult with her boyfriend on every little thing she did. If she was going to go out with us, she would say, well, I got to check with him. We'd be like, you sure? We're just literally going from one bar to the other. Really? Or I got to check with him and let him know that I'm going to be home late. The movie doesn't even let out for another hour. These can be indications of abuse. Fearful behavior, sometimes asking about your relationship or asking things are normal. Those are pretty good red flags. Again, the isolation is probably the biggest one I look for. If they're isolating, there's usually a good reason. When you're being abused and people know it, or you know it, you're afraid of talking about your relationship. So they're not talking about their romantic relationship at all. And I know that's kind of weird if we're talking work, because maybe we wouldn't want to at work. But if it's a friend and they don't want to talk about their partner at all, that's a pretty big red flag for me. So those are just some of the signs. Again, it varies. Big thing I look for is if something feels off, it's probably off. And always ask. I know it's scary to ask someone, hey, is everything okay? Are you being abused? Do you feel like you're trapped? Don't be afraid to ask. I know it's scary, but sometimes that is just what someone needs to tell you everything. How do you co-parent with an abuser? Whew, that's a tough one. So I recommend a lot of our really good webinars on building boundaries with toxic people. Carolyn does those. We also have a really great support group that we started for people that are co-parenting or otherwise dealing with divorce. We do that once a month. And I can have Heather include that in the email out when she sends this out. Because off the top of my head, I can't remember the date and I do not want to give you guys the wrong one. So we do have that. Big thing is building good boundaries and being realistic about what you can control. With someone that's abusive or manipulative, if you set a boundary, they're going to want to talk you out of it. The more you play tug of war, the more they'll tug back. So you really got to work on how can I set a boundary and make sure that my child's safe and that I'm safe. It's not easy. I also really recommend having good custody agreements for those. When men are the victim, how do you help them get the support they need since women can abuse just as much? It's a pride thing. Well, with men, the big thing I find, and this is just a me thing from my experience, is one, I have to be really careful about using the term abuse and victim. It really is one that just sets men off. I see it all the time where they either get angry or super ashamed. And so I really avoid that terminology with men. I also really work with them on how to stay safe, how to avoid being accused of abuse themselves. And so we talk about, being in public with my maybe female partner so that there is less chance of being accused of abuse. We talk about, how much it sucks that some of the resources just aren't made for men and how to access them. Sometimes they're using resources that you wouldn't think of. I know, it was years ago now, but I assume this program's still around. We ended up using the local church, which around here would be our Latter-day Saints, to help fund a hotel room for a man that was leaving a domestic violence situation because we just could not find a shelter where he lived, where he could stay, and he needed to be safe at this point. He had been hurt pretty bad. And I was so grateful that the local church was willing to help with that. There's some good books out there, I know, for men that are abused. I could not find any of them. And the ones I can think of, they're quite old now, unfortunately. If I do find them, I will email them out to y'all. But that's the big thing I find, is not making it have stigma, really being supportive, encouraging, not making them feel like they're in any way a victim. They are a survivor. And really helping them feel like, yes, your spouse that's female can sexually assault you. Yes, they can abuse you and try to control the money. Women, when we manipulate or abuse, the ones I've run into tend to be really good at that emotional manipulation, really good at gaslighting. And unfortunately, that is really harmful for men who are abused. Now, I also have seen many, many times someone who is an abuser use terminology that therapists use to try to manipulate their victims. And I do see women do that to men quite a bit. I see women have it happen to them from men. It really is about, as a friend, as a therapist, as a boss, as a colleague, as a family member, being non-judgmental, really being willing to hear them out from their perspective. If they say it's not abuse, don't argue with them. It's not going to help them if you just try to convince them of your point of view. Any other questions? Or any questions I didn't cover well enough, please let me know. I know I'm kind of rushing through this because I want to make sure I get everybody. And I know this is a really important topic. And likewise, I didn't talk about, if you guys do need an appointment with Blomquist Hale, please just give us a call and we will get you on the schedule. We have appointments available almost every day. We have virtual appointments. We have in-person appointments at all of our locations. Really depends on what you need. And most of my colleagues are pretty familiar with domestic violence. I'll grant you, some have pages and pages of experience, some have less. They're all familiar. They're all very supportive, wonderful people that I would trust with a family member. If you're maybe here from a workplace and you work with HR or you have a teammate that you're worried about, don't be afraid to consult with us on, what do I do? I have a staff member that I think is being abused, but I don't know how to help them. I don't want to interfere in their personal life. That's overstepping. Don't be afraid to call. We'll help you figure it out. It's not easy. And sometimes if you're someone supporting or caring about someone that's being abused, don't be afraid to come in for therapy just for you. It's hard. As a therapist, it breaks my heart every time I have someone come in and they're being abused and I know it and I can't fix it. I have to help them fix it. It's hard. Well, I'm really glad that that was helpful. Yes, you really cannot force anyone into abusing you. It's a tactic that abusers will use. It's not my fault I abused you. You made me. That's not possible. You did not twist their arm and make them, even if you did something first. I don't care what you did first. You did not invite that abuse. That was a choice they made. None of us can make someone abuse us. And I wish I could have fit more in this, honestly. I was deleting slides and putting in slides all the way up till the last hour before this. If it's really something we need more on, by all means, let Heather know, let me know. We're happy to do more presentations on this. We just knew this was one that was needed. Anyone else? Any questions, concerns, or resources? I know I went to the resources pretty fast. And if anyone missed them and needs a copy, just ask. We will be posting this on YouTube, so you can also see it there once we do that. So usually it's posted within a week. Heather's usually pretty quick about that, but usually within a week it's on our YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and just type in Blomquist Hale, that's our company's name, you will pull up all of our videos from all of our previous presentations. There's over 100 now. We're honestly looking at reorganizing them in playlists at this point because there's so many of them. There's ones on setting boundaries with toxic people. There's ones on how teens think, which is a really good one if you have a teenager. There's ones on communication. There's Carol's presentation on interpersonal conflict, which is really good for anyone that's in a situation where there might not be quite domestic violence yet, but there's conflict and we need to figure out how to get along. It's a really good one. All right, well, I know people have to get going. If you gotta go ahead, but I will stay here for a few more minutes to answer any questions. Do I know of any weekly support groups for victims? Yes, I do. So the best way to find them is to reach out to your local domestic violence resource. So for the Salt Lake area, I would recommend reaching out to YWCA for the latest information on groups. The ones that are on Facebook and YouTube and some of those that are around, Instagram groups, those are not run by state offices or anything. So those depend on just Googling them. But some of the best ones I know of are through YWCA in Salt Lake. You can also check with the Domestic Violence Coalition of Salt Lake area for those. In Ogden, we have a pretty good one that's done by YCC.